back to the class, everyone. Today we are going to be continuing our series on GAC 101, Grand Arena Theory. We've talked about a lot of different subjects now, and we're coming towards the end. In the last couple of videos, we looked at scouting. The purpose of scouting was to be able to gather a bunch of information on your opponent so that you can make a good plan. Well, today we're actually going to be looking at how to make that plan and some possible options for the plans that are kind of already set in place in our game. But before we look at the actual plans themselves, there are a few key things that we need to remember before jumping into that. So let's go ahead and look about some do's and don'ts again. The first do that I'm going to tell you guys to do is know your top 14 teams. I say 14 because that's for Division 1 and 2 and 5v5. However many teams that you need to have in total for offense and defense, you need to know that number, and you need to know what those teams are. Because what ends up happening is, and this is what you shouldn't do, is you end up setting a lot of teams on defense out of habit, when in reality, those teams are way out of the caliber for the type of roster you have now. A real practical example of this, and this isn't because one of these teams is bad and one of these teams is good. It's not exactly that simple. But one thing that I've noticed, or I noticed a lot before, was that a lot of people have an issue taking their Karth team off defense. And maybe your Karth team is your in your top 14 teams, and that's awesome. Keep using him. But for most people nowadays, we keep advancing our rosters, going up for new GLs, going for new characters, and we end up building a higher quality in general of our roster, and we can start to replace these old teams. And for example, I recently replaced my Karth team with a Mon Mothma team, which again, isn't the best team. It's not unbeatable. It's not even remotely meta, but it's going to get or steal a lot more banners than the Old Republic team ever would. So know that, know your top 14 teams, and avoid putting anything outside of that top 14 on defense. The next thing that we need to look at is know your limits. And what I mean by that is don't just have one strategy for everything. Because what happens is not every single GAC match you're going to have the roster built to do what you always do. Some people, we call them efficiency players. They always like to be able to full clear. They always like to one shot. They always like to win. Well, sometimes the opponent you're up against, they have a team that you just can't beat. And you need to adapt. So we're going to look at a few basic rules and a few basic strategies to always get the maximum amount of output for what you are going to put in to your GAC matches. At the end of the day, GAC is a PvP event. It is not something that you can always win. There always has to be a winner and there always has to be a loser. That's just kind of how it is. I can't promise anyone that you're going to win all 12 of your matches from here on out, because if I'm talking to two different people and both of them get matched up, it's just an impossibility. So however, we do want to get the most out of the match. With that, we have a pretty clear rule here, and that is always prioritize the win. If you can prioritize the win and you have extra room, you should be full clearing. If you can do both those, you should be able to try into one shot. And if you can do all three of those, you should start going for feats. That is the priority here. Your first priority is to win. Even if you don't take any zones, even if you only kill a handful of teams, but if you win, that's already enough to get you into the save margin. However, you don't want to do this to every opponent, because if you do this to every opponent, you won't even make Kyber, which is generally the basic goal for GAC. So that is the general rule. If you can do one, go to the next. If you can't do the next, stick with the one you have. And let's go ahead and look at some practical strategies, some practical plans that show us examples of one of these, the other, the third, and the fourth option. So the first option we're going to look at is a scenario where you just need to take the win, and a full clear isn't an option, feats are an option, one shot just isn't an option. And basically what that looks like is, let's say your enemy is going to use a choke point strategy. What is a choke point strategy? It is when your enemy opponent has a team that you can't beat, period. It doesn't matter if you throw every single one of your teams at it. It doesn't matter what combination, doesn't matter what you have, you try to throw at it, you're not going to take this down. Right now we have 3v3 coming up. Rey is kind of like this. You don't have your own shield to take Rey down. She's a choke point. And the reason why I call this the enemy strategy, because you can see the team that I put with the Jedi Knight Luke here is a team of Jawas. These people who use the choke point strategy, they choke you there at this point, and then they leave garbage in the rest of the field. So the way that you beat this kind of player is that you go for turtling. Turtling is when you set all of your strongest teams up top. And I don't just mean like, okay, a heavy defense. No, I mean, you look at your top 14 teams, take wherever the top 3 teams are. Here I use the example of GAS and both the Revens, and you put those on your bottom wall. So, okay, maybe you can't get through your enemy's bottom wall, but you can take out the rest of their trash teams, whereas they can't get through your bottom wall, period. And they don't have trash teams to take out like they left for you. So that is a scenario, an enemy strategy where you're just going to have to take the win, sacrifice the full clear, sacrifice the one-shots, and sacrifice the feats. The next scenario we're going to look at is where you can get the win and the full clear. And that is where the enemy tries to go on efficiency. And normally when an enemy tries to go on efficiency, they don't just leave garbage teams on defense. They leave generally weak teams, maybe teams that are more aimed at stealing banners than actually holding. So one of the ways to beat this type of player is to use what is called the attrition warfare. And what is that? It is basically when you look at your bottom wall and your bottom back wall, and you try to leave a bunch of really, really strong, like A- type of teams for your roster in the bottom front wall. And what that'll do for efficiency players, they absolutely hate getting bad banners. They want to get high banners every single win. They want to be able to get the one-shots. They want to be able to get high on the leaderboard. So what you do is you tempt them. You give them a team that can be taken out or maybe soloed by a Galactic Legend. Darth Revan is a great example. Darth Revan can be soloed by Supreme Leader Kylo Ren. So you leave him in the front wall, the efficiency player uses their GL, their SLKR, their Ray or whatever on Darth Revan, and then they get to the back wall and they can't clear Darth Revan. This is a pretty heavy defense, but at the same time, an efficiency player, you might not be able to one-shot them or get feats, but they are a pretty easy player to burn down. Because the teams that you see on the left side here, the Jedi Training Ray, the Mon Mothma, you can kill a unit or two on these teams and then go back in and kill them again. General Grievous is another great option of that, of something you just keep going at them. A lot of big name streamers use this type of strategy. Good old Maurice and Zareth are two of the big ones that I know of, where they'll try to set this really bulky, heavy defense, and they'll take the rest of their stuff, and they will just whittle down the enemy's defense until they've got the full clear, and the enemy can't full clear them. So not only is it a win, but they also take the full clear. So now we're getting a little bit into more of the heavier offense type of strategies. And these are really good, but I do need to say that the farther into this area we get, the higher risk that you lose everything. It's a higher risk, it's a higher reward situation. And ultimately, it takes a lot of skill on your offensive side of things because you're really not leaving that much defense anymore. So a clear example of a heavy offense here would be when your enemy tries to blockade you. What do I mean blockade you? Maybe they don't go full defense, but they put down a hefty defense. You can't cheese anything. You can't use nests against anything. You can't use troopers against anything. You need to take in a lot of your good counters to be able to work them down. And you could probably do it with one-shots. But the type of plan that requires is that you kind of use what we call the bait and bleed strategy. What is the bait and bleed strategy? You specifically leave certain teams in your front wall and in your back wall that generally require the same type of counters. A perfect example of this would be Mon Mothma and Geonosians. They share a lot of counters. They share Vader, they share Traya, they share just a wide group of meta teams. And if your opponent is going with the blockade strategy, they're leaving their kind of kill-all teams like GAS and Darth Revan. They're kind of kill-all teams. They'll beat a whole lot of stuff. Whereas these counters are much more specific. So if you can do this, these teams probably won't hold, but you require your enemy to use an out-of-the-box counter that is normally going to result in a lot less banners. So this is a strategy that you can do if you're trying to get a full clear, or a win, full clear, and one-shots. Again, using this type of thing really relies on your ability as an offensive player, because if you lose one of those battles, the defense that you left isn't going to hold, and you're going to need that win through another means. And the last strategy we're going to look at today is the win, full clear, one-shots, and feats. This is the hardest to achieve, and not even necessarily on a skill level, but this really requires a little bit of lack of skill level on your opponent's side. And the only time that I would really suggest using this is when your enemy's strategy is cheese. They leave just terrible teams that are not even in their top 14 on defense. I hate on these teams a lot, Rolo, Phasma. Again, if these teams are in your top 14, use them. But if they're not, leave them on the bench. And basically, your idea here for a strategy to be able to get all the things you want is to leave a banner stripping strategy. The teams that I used to use, actually a slide that I've already shown, is Jedi Train Array, Geos, and Mon Mothma. Really not the best teams. Really probably not even going to hold. Even if you try to make a point where you're trying to bait one instead of using the other, the opponent will have a kill-all that will just be able to get rid of them. But the idea here is you're trying to put teams that can't necessarily be soloed. They'll at least strip some banners, so that way when you go to solo or undersize or whatever the cheese on the enemy defense, you both full clear, you both one-shot, but you were able to get the feats and the higher banners because you went really, really heavy offense. Again, this is a very high-risk, high-reward type of strategy, and you do not want to use this against every opponent. This is something you need to adapt to, and this is something, I hate to say it, but you should use against weak opponents. You should really try to milk the opportunity that you have with them. And that is going to be it for today. There are obviously plenty of other different types of strategies with lots of different examples, and this will change via your roster, what you have available. But that is pretty much the general idea. If you want to catch me before the next video, you can find me on Twitch. I stream my GACs every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We also have a Discord server and YouTube. All these links can be found in the syllabus below. But until the next time, guys, that is going to be it. So, stay awesome.